key player in tonight's meetup, is a experiential recruiting platform which connects tech startups with talents through hackathons. So I'm gonna put the slide. Okay. So yeah. So for HackUp, we also have a Vancouver HackUp meetup. Some of you might join our meetup through that platform today. And so yeah, we not only host DigitalOcean meetups, we also host other meetups. So at the end, I'm gonna tell you guys what our next meetup is going to be. And so before we start, we're gonna have a shout out for EduHacks. All right, so EduHacks is also another hackathon that HackUp is hosting. And EduHacks is going to be a 24-hour hackathon that's going to be happening on September 30th to October 1st. And it's going to be at the Vancouver Convention Center with a grand prize of $10,000. Now, if you're a student right now, you can go on eduhacks.com and apply as an applicant. If you are not a student, I'll tell you guys later. So our themes for the hackathon is we're going to have artificial intelligence, talent acquisition, wearable technology, and VR education. And we've got sponsors from Adobe, GitHub, and we have Microsoft and a lot of other amazing sponsors. So right now, we are going to have a $10,000 cash prize, and we have currently over 1,100 student signups. And when we made the slides, it was 700. It was about 3 weeks ago. So we exceeded our expectation for sure. And we're going to have 8 tech workshops on the day of. And what we need right now is another part that you can apply to is we're looking for mentors. So we're looking for 50 mentors who have at least around 2+ years of work experience. And you can apply at, I'll tell you guys later. And so if you become one of our mentors, you're going to meet all the talents on the day of at the event. And you're going to be able to access to all the workshops and meet all the experts from different areas. And best of all, you get free meals and drinks, and you also get swag, and everybody loves swag. Okay, so if you want to sign up as a mentor, you guys can go on eduhacks.com/mentor, and you can be, and then you can sign up as the mentor. Okay, so basically, if you sign up as a mentor, we will go through a screening process, and we will contact you after our screening process. Okay, and if you don't have a lot of experience right now, but you still want to get involved with our hackathon this September, you can also sign up as a volunteer. So for our volunteer and mentors, we're going to have 4-hour slots for each person, and you can definitely stay for longer if you want to. And if you can sign up here at this long link, or you can scan this QR code afterwards. And I can bring this back up after our meetup. Okay, so, all right, so today we're gonna have 2 workshops, and we have got speakers, Mike Nichols, who's going to be speaking about how to build a React app in 2017, and we got Suan Gao speaking about Docker and why we'll need it. So without further ado, we're going to start our workshops today, and first up is going to be Mike. Welcome, Mike. Oh yeah, and as you guys can see, there's swag on the table, and also as promised, we brought you guys DigitalOcean swag. They're all right here. You guys can all grab them when you guys go tonight, and we got Sammy the Shark, and we got t-shirts. So feel free to grab them.
Excellent. Welcome everyone. It's totally full house. No one is standing place over there. There's some seats in the back, but it might be too far. Anyway, welcome. I'm going to talk about React, a little bit more about Next.js, which is built around React. It uses React under the hood to show you how you can build a web application in 2017. It's going to change probably 2 weeks from now, but for now, this is like the latest and greatest according to what I've used in the past. Before I get started, quick show of hands. Who knows about React? Who has heard of React? All right, there's a bunch of hands, and everybody else is probably here for the Docker talk, so that's cool. Who is using React right now in production environment? Like, who's building something at work with React? Excellent, significantly fewer hands. That's always the case. Cool, so I'm gonna get started, and the way this is gonna work is, this is much easier. So I'm gonna talk about who I am, I'm gonna talk about React, do it yourself. It's gonna be a bit of a history talk. I'm gonna start off 4 years ago when React first came out, what happened, how we used to build it, and how it has changed. And then at the very end, I'll talk about boilerplates, where people started to like create starter kits to get started faster because there's a lot of work without it. And then de-boilerplate. So that's something Facebook came out when they realized that there's a lack of starting point for React applications. But the real meat of the talk is Next.js. And when I'm going to talk about that, I'll do some live coding and I'll build a React application on the screen, and you can just like watch, see how easy it is. The fun with that is that it may often go wrong. So yeah, we'll see how it goes tonight. But to get started, I was thinking how I'm going to put that together and how I'm explaining who I am and my background and whatnot. And after talking to some friends and figuring out what I should do, I came up with the idea of showing you like where I've gone through over the past and what I've done in the different places. So first of all, I was born in Switzerland many decades ago, kind of. And I was using the internet, learning how to code when I was very young, but I didn't speak English. So I'm like, crap, I don't understand anything. Everybody talks English on the internet. And I went to Canada, and this is totally off. Cool. Don't use absolute positioning on your slides. This is why you're not doing that, okay? Just imagine that's like further down here, okay? So after I went to Canada to study English, I worked at a company here in Vancouver. They wanted to open an office in the UK. So they shipped me to the UK because I had a Swiss passport. I could work there forever. So yeah, close enough. I went to the UK, worked there for a while, and then I looked at the map and I'm like, okay, where haven't I been? So I went from the UK to Korea. Yeah, right. Close enough. It works perfectly on my screen. So I went to Korea, lived there for a year and a half, and throughout the time I traveled around, I was always doing some kind of like web development, whether it's like Java in the days in Europe or Next and Node.js and the React in later stages. Cool. Right now I work at VC Labs, a small company here in Vancouver. We're building chatbots for market research. So instead of filling out like online forms with like questions and whatnot, you get like conversations with a bot. And on the back end, we take all that information and process it and analyze it and give it to the market researchers. But tonight, I'm going to start out with React in the way back. When it first came out, 4 years ago roughly, I think, you had to do everything by yourself. It was do it yourself from scratch. So the directory structure, how are you going to structure your components, where are you going to put your code, all that had to be thought out from the beginning by yourself. And then you had to kind of bundle that stuff up. You couldn't just serve React to the web. You had to either bundle it with Webpack or Browserify. And back then, there wasn't just one standard. Nowadays, most people use Webpack. There were Webpack, Browserify, a whole bunch of other ones. You had to figure out what you're going to do. One eventually died, and then you had to migrate to the other one. It was good fun. And then, are you going to use Babel? Yes or no? Babel allows you to use newer ES or like JavaScript features, like arrow functions and things like that, and then compile or transpile that to JavaScript that the browser understands. Browsers at that time weren't that modern, and they didn't understand the new features that are in the ECMAScript specification. So you have to use some kind of tool, configure that, and all that stuff. And then once you had that going and you had the React component, it looked like nothing. Like my slide before, everything was messed up, no styling. So you have to think about styling. Are you going to use a whole bunch of stuff to think about? Next up, you had to think about alt module reloading, or replacement. Let's say you code in your editor and you make some changes to your component. In the past, you would have to shut down your server, start it back up, and then you see your changes. When React came around, and there's some other tools that use it as well, there's this concept of making your code changes, save it, and then have the browser reload automatically and show these changes. So you had to configure that, again, on your own with like a lot of tutorials and help on the internet. And then you finish your application, you put it on the internet, and you realize that Google doesn't index it. And you're like, uh-oh, I just spent like 6 months building my application, and nobody can find it. The problem was that React is a front-end framework, right? So what you get when you send a request to the server, you get an empty HTML file with a few empty divs and an ID, and then on the client side, the browser renders the React application into that empty div and shows the UI. So to the user browsing the internet, that's perfectly fine, right? You see the web application, you can navigate and click on stuff. But to a machine like the Google search engine, they actually don't see that stuff because at that time, they didn't execute JavaScript to render these applications. So you just get an empty div. So for a short time, there were a bunch of companies that helped you deal with that stuff. But again, like that's another something you have to do by yourself, code it. And then there's the whole thing between development and production environments, right? So in your development environment, bundles and JavaScript files, they were like 2-3 megabytes in size. But in your production application, you don't want to serve a 2 or 3 megabyte file to your users because they're just going to be waiting and waiting and waiting. And then all of a sudden, you get like the UI render. So you have to configure it for production, development, all kinds of different settings. So people started to think like, this is annoying. And what happened is different companies and different like people in the open source community, they created boilerplates. They configured all the stuff I just talked about, put it in a separate repository, and then every time they started a new project, they used one of these boilerplates to get started. So they saved a couple of weeks of work getting that set up. Now, the option there were build and maintain your own, like in your, like if it's a large company, you may have certain preferences, you build your own, or you could use an existing boilerplate. At that time, the most famous one was called React boilerplate from a guy in Austria. His name is Max Stoiber. He put that together, it became really popular, and everybody started to use it, most people. And the React team at Facebook, they started to pick that up, and they realized that there's a lot of them. So I was curious today, like how many React boilerplates are out there that people can use to get started? Does anybody have a guess?
10,000.
10,000, okay. Any other guesses? That's close.
300.
300? That is closer. All right, so what I did is I searched around and I found a website from Andrew H. Farmer. I don't know that guy, but I think he did a good job. He did an amazing job, actually, and you can check out that website later. But basically comes down to 143 different React starter kits. And what you can do on the website is you can start adding tags to stuff that you care about. Like, do I care about server-side rendering? You put it in, and then it filters the repositories by everything that supports React or like server-side rendering. You keep on adding stuff into it until you come down to like 3. But then you still have to go through these 3 and figure out which one you're going to use, which you still maintain. Not fun, trust me. So Facebook eventually, like, we're talking like 3 years after React came out and people started using it. So Facebook created the one and only React starter kit, and it's called Create React App. Very appropriate name. Marketing team was probably not involved. But anyway, Create React App is the standard command line interface to create React application. And everything I talked about on my first slide in terms of server-side rendering and all that, you get that for free, except for server-side rendering. So you have a React application, everything is configured, development, production. It's really fast to get up and running, and then you deploy it, and what happens is Google Index still doesn't find your website. So great, they're going to find another system to deal with that, or find some other helpers and tutorials that do it for you. However, what makes it easy with create React app to get started? Like, you run that command npm install -g create React app. That installs the command line interface globally in your system. Next up, you use that CLI, create React app, to give you the folder name. So that creates a folder, and then you wait for quite some time, depending on your internet connection. npm install takes forever. So you wait for that, and then you go into it, you run npm start, and you're good to go. It's way better than what we had like 4 years ago, when it took like a couple of weeks to get up and running. Now you actually get that in like a minute or two. But the reason why I'm here, the reason why I'm talking about all that is because I want to give you a background of like what people who have been working with React for 4 years have had to go through in terms of like the pain. And I didn't suffer, but it was painful to get through all of that. And what happens now is what's next, and Next.js is next. So in order to make this fun and interactive, we're going to do some live coding. And when you do that, you usually don't do it in front of like 40 people, just because stuff can go wrong, and it usually does. So if something goes wrong, just bear with me. And if it doesn't go wrong, then lucky me. All right. So the way this works, I'm going to kill my presentation and it's bigger. Can everybody see that in the back? Yeah. All good? All right. Cool. So first up, we're going to create a folder. Next.js intro demo, and we're going to go into that folder. All right. So just to show you that I'm not cheating, this thing is empty. Make that sure. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install, we're going to initialize an npm package. And I use yarn, you can use npm, it doesn't really matter what you do. But you type yarn in it, and because I trust all the default values, I do -y. Fantastic, now we have a package.json. Next thing we do is we're going to open a code editor. And I'm going to increase the size here as well. Is that readable? Thumbs up? Cool. All right, so we've got a package JSON that is fairly empty. Version 1, that's great. We start with version 1. Nothing else in here. Now, in order to get started with Next.js, we need to install a couple dependencies. And guess what? The first one you're going to install is yarn add next. Cool. And we need React. And because it's a web application, we also need React DOM. Now, if the internet works, this should be a piece of cake. This is the most fun part right here. Cool. Welcome to a front-end application that has like a lot of dependencies. Yeah, that's what we deal with these days. So now we have Next installed, we have React, and we have React DOM. And in order to get this thing up and running, we need to add a script to our package JSON. An npm script allows us to do certain things by running yarn and the script name. So we're going to do a script, and we need one script only. Hang on. The script is called dev for development, and what we do is we just run the next command. Now, the next command is actually available under node module spin. There's a bunch of like binaries here. One of them is next. But if you have an npm script, you can just use the name of the binary in your script, and then yarn is linking that up, and you can just use it like that. That makes sense? Cool. Right, so now I have dev. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it up, see what happens. Like, I didn't actually build anything, I didn't do any coding, but I'm going to do yarn dev. Okay, so it gives me an error message, and it says I couldn't find a pages directory. Please create one under the project root. Okay, so let's do that. It's telling me exactly what to do. I'm going to go here, create a pages directory, and I'm going to run that again. Nice. Ready on localhost 3000. So we are going to localhost 3000, and I don't think I can I can do this figure too. Cool. It says now 404, this page could not be found. Now that's obviously because we didn't put anything into the pages folder yet. So because we're looking at the root, Next.js expects a file in my pages folder called index.js. If I put an index.js file in there, it will be served at that URL. So what they do is they use the pages directory as the URL router. So if I do pages/about-us/index.js, in the URL I can go to localhost 3000/about-us, and then that file gets rendered. So I don't actually have to worry about installing React Router and dealing with all the kind of like setup I need to do and defining my routes and all that. It's just using the file system, because the file system is already a route for us. All right, so we're gonna create an index.js file in here. That's it, like for now. So we go back and we are going to, so hot reloading kicks in. I don't even have to refresh the page. It just automatically checks my file system. And if it detects a change, it will automatically reload the page because it expects something has changed. So I don't have to do anything. Just type my stuff, come back here and wait. Now let me refresh. Okay, so the actual error that we see is the default export is not a React component in page root. No, that makes sense because our index.js file is empty. Okay, so it's talking about something default export. Now that's like using modules. So I do export default homepage. That's kind of like it expects an export default. I'm going to define my homepage, and this is where it gets interesting. So homepage. All right, I'll explain it in just a minute. Hang on, h1/h1. All right, so who knows what's going on here? Nobody wants to talk in front of everybody.
Template.
Template, yeah, it's a functional React component. So you're probably familiar with like React component like extends from React.component, and then you have like curly brackets, and they do some stuff in there with a render function. This is just like the lightweight version of a React component. It's just a function, and it uses ES6, so there's like some arrow function here. But really what it's doing is that the round brackets here, they just say that there's one return statement from that function, and the return statement is the JSX that I put in here. All right, so that's it. Now, in the meantime, if I save this, and I'm going to go back to my browser, it already reloaded the page, and I can see that H1 showing up right here. So in the past, getting to this point, you were looking at like a few weeks or like at least 1 or 2 weeks to set everything up, test everything, just get up and running. Now you just do it in front of like the whole meetup. Okay, cool. But that's not really fancy. But this is one of the benefits of Next.js. You use the pages folder to define your URL structure and where you want to have your files and where you want to show them. Now, to show you that it actually works with routing in different folders, I'm going to create another folder in here called about, and I'm going to just copy that file, and we're going to rename this to about and learn about us. Okay. Now you notice that I put this in a folder called about, and I talked about that before. If we go back here and we do /about. For some reason I can't increase the size of the URL bar. It's not very smart. Cool. There we go. So it just loads whatever is in the file system. I didn't configure any of the router or parameters. Any questions so far before we dive a little bit deeper? Yep.
You didn't include like import React into your page view, into your index?
Yeah.
You included it on like importing it every single page, or how is that? Where does it bring React?
Good. You pay close attention. That's right. There's no import React happening here. Next.js is doing that for us. They take care of importing that wherever we need it. Now, if I was to create a React class here that extends from React.component, then I would have to import it manually because I actually need the reference to React. But because this is a functional component, it's literally just a function that returns JSX, and I don't need to worry about importing React. Yeah. Okay. So that's cool, but it doesn't really help us when we're on the home page and nobody knows how to go to the About Us page. So we're going to add a real quick add a link here. the way this works is we're going to add, so first of all, we're going to import some stuff. Import link from next link. And we're going to put that in a paragraph. And we're going to say, learn more about us. And about us is wrapped in a link. Cool. Fun watching me here. href, just like you would do with a regular A tag for an anchor. And we want to go to about. And we have to wrap that so that the markup is valid. Just tell the browser that this is an anchor, so the mouse becomes like a little pointer. But that's it. So now there's good old React doesn't allow us to return two root elements from the render function. And since this is the render function as a functional component, I have to wrap that in a div. And because I'm a little bit OCD, I have to format that properly. So now we have a link. All right, easy. And if I click it, it goes to about us. Pretty straightforward. And again, I haven't configured any link or any router or anything. Now, let me just really quick add the same thing over here to let us go back to the home page. Easy. So what we're going to do is go back to the root, and we're going to say, go home. Well, stay here. Go home. And we go back, and it reloads, and we can go home. And we go home. Cool. So far, so good. So now we have a React application that has some pages. We can go back and forth. We can do a couple of things. And with that alone, you can build a blog if you have static content and whatnot, right? That's all you really need. You need a couple links and a way to display your content. You can add any comments or whatnot. But now, another thing where Next.js really shines is it actually provides server-side rendering. And what that means is if I do, let me show you. I'm going to open this. So on the right here, you can see my dev tools. And if I do a full page refresh, you can see that it actually loaded that entire HTML from the server. So the server sent me back everything I need. Now, if I look at the source code and I search for go home, hang on, am I on the home page? Yeah, I'm on the home page. So about us. OK, so you can see that in the HTML that the server sent, I got my full rendered everything. So if Google search index bot or whatever comes to my page and does a GET request and pulls that down to index, it actually finds all my content in here. If it was just a client-side app, you would just see an empty div, and then nothing would happen until the browser kicks in and does it. OK, I got 10 minutes, so I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to show you how we can load some data from an external API, because this is where it gets interesting in terms of like how does this work on the server side. Because if you do it by yourself, then you have to figure out how does Node.js load stuff, how does the browser load stuff with fetch and whatnot. So what we're going to do is we are going to create another file here. We're going to copy this one, and we're going to put it at the root, and we're going to call it weather, just because. We're going to call this weather. Weather today, and sure, we go back, and here what we want to render in the end is the weather in city is, and then description. Okay, so we somehow need to go fetch city and the description, whatever the weather is, cloudy or sunny or whatnot. Now React provides, or Next.js provides us a helper function that they call internally before they render the application. So if a page needs any kind of data, we can specify it in that helper function that I'm going to write in a minute, and then Next.js takes care of loading that at the right time and providing the content to the server-side HTML and also to the client so that the client can continue interacting with it. the first thing we need to do is we need to convert that functional component to a React class, because we have to add a static class that is defined by next. So the way we do that is pretty straightforward. We make this a class, and this thing turns into extends react.component. And we're going to do something like this. We're going to take this away here. And now that it's a class, we're going to do a render function that returns the same thing we had previously. And now, because I use React, I need to import React from React. Cool. There we go. So React is back in, and we have a render function in the component here. Standard stuff. If we go back here, and we are, oh, hey, we need a link right here to bring us to that weather page, obviously. Weather. Now, one thing you notice is that I actually put the weather file in the root instead of a folder. That's the same thing as just putting it into a weather folder and calling it index.js. Same idea. We go back here, and we get the weather link automatically. I can click on that, and it says the weather in city is one. Now, where the helper function comes in that React Next.js provides us is right here. Every component where we need some data, we can specify a static get initial props, and that's really all we need to do. It's a function, and the function returns an object, and the object is the properties that are going to be passed in to the React component, and I can use that in the render function later. So first thing we're going to do is, before we get to the return statement, we are going to define some kind of weather data, and we're going to fetch that from somewhere. We'll figure that out in a minute. And because fetch, who knows what fetch is? Who has used fetch before? Okay, so to people who don't know fetch, this is like, you know XHR, right? Where you like create a client-side request with Ajax. You use either jQuery.ajax or you use XHR like directly, or you use some kind of helper library or whatnot. So fetch is the newer version of doing client-side Ajax requests. So the browser provides us with that. Now the URL is conveniently located right here, and I can just paste that in here. So this is going to the weather API on openweathermap.org, and it's going to look for Vancouver, and it's going to pull down a JSON file. We're going to parse that and show the information on the screen. Now, one thing to note is fetch returns a promise, a JavaScript promise. So what I either have to do is .then. So whenever the request is finished, it will call my then function, and then I can do some stuff in there. Or with Next.js, I can use something called async await. That is part of the newer versions of React. So in order to do that, I specify this function as async, and then here I just await. Now, it looks like synchronous code, but it's really asynchronous. What happens here is like the code, when it runs, it just waits until the response comes back from the fetch function, and then it processes that. So first thing we do is this is actually a response. And then const weather data is, again, we have to use await response.json. So it parses the response, turns it into a JSON object. And now we have weather data being a JSON object. And we can return it here, weather data. Because I'm using ES6, I can drop this and just use the shorthand form of writing my object creation, and that's the same thing. Cool. Let's just go back and see that when we reload this page, that's not cool. We'll get to that in a minute. From the home page, I'm going to clear this. You can see, oh, hang on, I forgot something. Uh-oh, see, that's what I meant. If something goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong. Yeah, I wanted to show how it works without importing it first. On the client, when the browser uses it, just give it, let's see. There we go. So here's proof that it did call that API, so that call that I have in the root actually worked there. It made the request, and I got back that JSON object with the weather data for Vancouver right now. Now, as you noticed already, you saw it before, if I refresh the page, it breaks. Now, that happens because when I refresh the page, the entire code over here gets executed on the server side. So there's some kind of node server that runs inside of Next that executes that code, and puts together the static HTML and then sends it to the client. But yeah, as somebody said, fetch is not defined on the server side. It's not a global object. So what I have to do is, the easiest thing to do in this case, I do yarn at isomorphic fetch.
What version of Node are you using?
I think it's 8 something. 8.4.
Okay. Yeah. Node doesn't have fetch like this?
It doesn't, not like this, yeah. So I'm pulling that in. The reason for that is that this is a polyfill for the fetch that I use on the browser. So I don't have to write if server side do this fetching, or if client side do the other fetch. I can just use the exact same code as I have here, and all I need to do is import fetch from isomorphic fetch. And now on the server side, fetch is defined by this thing. On the client side, fetch is defined by the browser that implements fetch automatically. Okay, so if you go back and refresh and done. One thing you notice is that over here, you don't see that request to the weather API anymore. It's gone. The reason is because the server executed it for us and put all the information into the HTML and sent it back to the client. This is really where Next.js saves you a lot of time getting something up and running with data rendered server side or client side. And now the next thing we need to do is just look here. So there's some kind of weather object with an array, and the first one says view clouds, and further down it says name Vancouver. That's all we're going to do. Over here. The weather data is now that entire JavaScript object that I showed you before. We can obviously clean that up a little bit, but here we are going to do const weather data. We structure that from this.props, because as I mentioned, whatever we return here gets merged into the props of that component. So I have access to the weather data. And then what we need here is const city name, weather data.name. Well, let's try that first, and then we do the other one. This is how we can render some React or some JavaScript here, city name. We go back. So we got Vancouver, and the other thing is under weather array first element description. All right. So this thing is under weather. It's an array first element description. And here, I'm just going to remove this. Clear sky. The weather clearly changed since I did the last time, earlier today. Yeah, so in a nutshell, Next.js allows you to use the file system to build your URLs. So you don't have to worry about the router, you don't have to worry about updating your router and learning about their syntax and their configuration. You just use the file system, and everybody's familiar with that already. And it also allows you to render your application server side so that your users get like the best performance in both worlds. If you have a very dynamic application where you have like form and you have like stuff to click around, then when the request comes back to the client, the client-side JavaScript kicks in, and then you get a single-page application anywhere on your entire application, like any URL. You just hit it. So if you send links to your friends or social media, whatnot, people can click on it and they get a fully rendered React application by just hitting the URL. Cool. Any questions? Yes.
If you fetch in component build now or build now, will the same behavior happen?
No. If the question was if in regular React applications, when you want to fetch some code or some data on the client side, you create a function, a lifecycle method called component.mount. React calls that after it mounts the component to the build, and then you can do your fetch and get it. Now, if you do that here, it wouldn't work on the server side, because on the server, the component never gets mounted. That's why Next.js provides that static get initial props. That's the only convention that you need to know about when you want to use Next.js. That this function gets called both client side and server side. Everything else just works.
What about component build now?
Component will mount, same thing. It doesn't get executed on the server side yet.
I have a question. If you go back to the browser, you're going to see there's sending some requests. What is happening there?
The on-demand?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the hot reloading, checking if something has changed on the back end, and if it did, then it reloads the page. Yeah.
So I'm still able to say in MoveX side put a div and then a provider div, and then in the other component I inject the property into them, because right now it's spread in the file system. So is it still possible to use Redux or MoveX to achieve those state management?
I'm not familiar with MoveX, whether it works with Next.js, but we use Redux at my workplace, and there's a wrapper called Redux Next that helps you deal with that situation.
So you can still use those map stored to...
Correct. Yeah, map stated props. You can still use that. And what happens is when the component renders on the server side, everything gets done on the server side and then just sent back to the client as part of the request. I'm not sure about MoveX, but there might be help.
So today I saw you import the link module from Next. Is there a module like redirect, like under some condition you redirect the users to certain pages?
Yeah, if you want to redirect, like when somebody goes to URL, immediately redirect?
Yes.
Okay. The way you would do that is, one thing I didn't show to keep it easy is there's actually an object passed in here called context that Next.js sends me. And what you get in there is the request and the response objects that you also have access to in Node. So when it gets executed on the server, you can do a res or response dot whatever it is to redirect. And then send back a 301 or a 302 status code, give it a location header, and then it'll redirect. Yeah. We use that for when people go to a page and they're not authorized to look at it, we do a redirect back to the login page based on exactly.
You mentioned that the process that's running is checking the server updates of the application. Does that mean if any data changes, the web page is going to change like in real time?
Unfortunately not. You mean like the weather data here?
Yeah, like for example, the data changes this web page.
That would be cool, but it doesn't. Yeah.
But if you refresh it, it's going to update. Right?
Totally. If I refresh the page, the whole thing gets re-executed on the server side. Yeah.
And the other question is there a way for you to, like, for example, check in updates in 5 minutes, like notification system for using React.js? So, like, for notification system, you have to check if you have a message come in like 5 seconds, for example. So, is it able to do that?
Yeah, you would have to do the old approach of like having an interval that responds, or use WebSockets and have the server push it to the client. Yeah.
You said everything's going to change in a few weeks?
Probably.
Okay.
it's JavaScript. They all change in a few weeks.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like something's going to change.
No, not that I know of, but
okay.
Yeah, I mean, we
Do you
all know
have
how
any
it goes.
secret information?
What's that? I don't have secret information. Yeah.
So does it always require a server? Is it possible to say make it a totally static site? Because when you use React, you can just make it to a totally static site and you just host it in AWS S3 or something like that.
Totally.
So for Next.js, does it always require a server to do the server-side rendering, or I can just make some configuration and then do away with the server-side rendering?
Since the meetup is today and not like 3 weeks ago, I can say, yes, you can export static HTML and ship that to S3. That's a new feature that came out about 3 weeks ago. They launched version 3 of Next.js, and it has a export command, and then you specify which URLs you want to export and what parameters they care about and whatnot. Anyway, it's like one configuration file, and then you hit next export, and it creates an out folder with the static HTML and CSS. Anything else?
How do you have those styles with this?
Same as in
Webpack, right?
It uses Webpack under the hood. So actually, one thing I didn't even touch on is that every page, every URL is its own JavaScript bundle. So if I have code on my About Us page, it is not actually available on the home page. because it's two different URLs. And when I navigate, Next.js fetches asynchronously the code that it needs for the page. And styling, you ask about styling, you can use anything you want. We use style components at work, but you can do CSS modules, you can do regular CSS. One other thing, in production, when I built this application for production, there's a feature that I don't want to go into because it takes a while to configure it and run it. But on the home page, what I can do is, because the server knows how to render these pages, the URLs, I can add a flag to my link called prefetch. And if I do that here as well, what happens is in production, when I come to the home page, the server renders this application, sends it back, and after it sends the request, the client goes through my website and looks for links that have the prefetch feature or flag set, and then it asynchronously goes and fetches the content, including the data of the next page, because that's the only two places a user can go from this website. You can click on weather or click on about us. So when you click on about us, you have like instant loading, because the text or the content is already in your browser cache. So you just click the link, you get it right away in the production. Any other questions? Cool, that's it. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
I don't have a YouTube channel. You should. I should. All right.
All right, thank you, Mike. And next up, we're gonna have Suan Gao. And if anybody is leaving before you go, you can grab some swag. They're up here.
Let's see if this works. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Suan Gao, and I'm here today to present you my take on an intro to Docker. So who is here for Docker? Awesome. I didn't expect that many hands, actually. So thanks, Mike, for this wonderful presentation about Next.js and also React. So your next question is so you have your React.js app. Now what? So you need to have it somewhere, right? People can access it. So usually it's a server. It could be AWS S3. It could be your home server. It could be anywhere. But today what I'm going to talk to you about is Docker, a way to run containers on the cloud. So give a little intro about myself. I'm a full stack engineer at Move, and I love photography and video games. Started working with Docker 2 years ago, and loved it since. And I have experience building and deploying high-performance applications on the cloud with Docker, and also continuous integration and testing using Docker. And a little about my background is I graduated 2 years ago from Purdue University in the United States. After that, I moved to Canada and got a job and started working for various companies. And I started as a mobile application developer, I should say, and then moved on with front end and then back end, and now I work full stack. So you might have heard about VMs, and you might also use VMs. And there are companies that's right now using VMs for their application deployment. And you might have a question, okay, so this container, is it like another kind of VM, and what's the difference? And can I do the same thing I can do in a VM, in a container? Well, the question is, yeah, you can do pretty much the same thing and save a lot of resources, actually. So on the left, you see a normal VM architecture. So you have a host, which is usually a server on a rack in a data center. And then you have a host OS, and you have a hypervisor. And this one is type 2, so it requires a host OS. If you're using VMware, it's a type 1. And then you have a bunch of VMs running on this host, and each of them have their own OSs and have their own libraries, have their own kernels, and they all run separately using different resources, one you assign to it. And then you have your apps running on this VM. So yeah, it's a pretty good solution to run applications, but right now computers are getting faster, and also the applications requires more and more performance and memory and processing power, and some people decided to run most of your on containers, and you see it's much less going on with the container system. So you have a server and a host OS, and then you have this Docker thing on the side, and everything pretty much runs like an application. So every app is inside its own container, and it runs just like a process, like on your local machine. So what's so different? So Docker utilizes the host kernel for the application to run. So for example, if you're on Linux machine, which Docker natively supports, and then you run containers on it, it will use the same kernel that your machine is on. And then that will save a lot of time because you don't have to have the OS installed. You have all the native libraries and everything available. And then it's really easy to start and stop containers because they're basically a packaged one single process applications. I'll talk about that later. So yeah, this is the difference. It's very, very seamless and very lightweight. So on a Docker environment, so what you have is you have a client, which usually it's one you install on your local machine, and you also have a host, which usually your local machine. And the hosts have the host OS and the Docker process running. If you're using Mac or Windows, it will also have a virtual machine. But you said like, we're not using virtual machines anymore, right? Because Docker uses Linux kernel, and then on the Mac, it still requires a Linux VM running on it. So before you probably heard about Docker machine and on the Mac and Docker for Macs. Right now, Docker for Mac is more, it's much better than the Docker machine as it's not actually running VirtualBox virtual machine, but it's still the same thing. So you need a Linux distribution to run because for the kernel. And then you have your multiple containers running, and you have your images, which is hosted on a Docker registry, which could be a public registry, which is you can go, everybody can get access, and it has a lot of application images that you can use and base your image from. You can also host your own image registry, which is a lot of companies are doing right now. They want everything hosted in-house, so they have their own Docker registry. So Docker versus traditional deployment. Well, in my background, we don't have Docker. I still remember the days of SSH into server or FTP in server and grab the files, copy over, or have source control and pull down the updates and restart the server, restart Apache, all that different things. But the difference is it solves it only works on my machine, because if a Docker container is built, it should work across all different platforms. So no longer is an excuse for our developers that it only works on our machine, so it works, but I don't know why it doesn't work on yours. And you can easily manage dependencies through Docker Link. So like you have an application that uses MySQL or MongoDB or some other services, but Docker is built for single processes, but you don't want to run multiple in a container. So you could have Docker Link to link up with multiple containers, and they behave like a one app. It's easily scalable. If there's time, I could talk about how you can orchestrate using different tools. You can have hundreds and hundreds of containers running on a single machine because they're very lightweight. And goodbye magic script. So there's a lot of times you have a script that's very crucial for the deployment. Without it, it doesn't work. So goodbye for that. Oh, my machine. Oh. Okay, so what Docker is for? So Docker is not built for every use cases, but what it's for is for running single process application. There is a possibility that you could run multiple processes, but using supervisor or some other things, but it's not really recommended because that's not what it's built for. It's running a stack of linked containers because Docker leverages the host OS, and you can run a lot of containers on one host. And running your application in a reproducible environment every time. So it's really good for developers. So for example, you're working on a really big project with a big team, multiple sections, and then you want your dev environment to be always up to date, and you want the full stack of your dev environment on your local machine, so that if you can really control your dev environment. With Docker, you could basically run the entire stack from the routing system, from the databases, from the application itself, everything can be running on Docker, and they can be linked, and then everything is good to go. So you can do whatever you want with it. Running CI and CD for application. Right now, a lot of you might heard of something like Circle CI, Jenkins, a lot of things runs continuous integration. There's also a thing called Drone, which used to be a premium service, but now they open sourced it. And Drone continuous integration basically runs on Docker. So every time you build, it spins up a container to run the build. And then also everything it leverages all the power of Dockers. And run production stack locally. So in my work, we have troubles running the production stack and pointing stuff to production. And with so many environment variables for the servers, it's really hard. But if everything was built with Docker, you could have as easy as one Docker compose file, and you can just have Docker compose up. It runs the entire stack, and many more, which I don't know. Probably there's more. What is not for? One thing I mentioned, running multiple processes is not built for that, but you can do it if you want. Running development environment, well, you have Vagrant for that. I know a lot of people they start using Docker and they think, oh, maybe it's a replacement for Vagrant, but Vagrant is built for something different. A lot of people they start a container and they wonder, oh, how do I SSH into this container? Well, please not do that. There's a Docker attach for that for you to, or Docker execute for you to run bash inside the container. You don't need to SSH into the container. You could treat it as a local process that's running by itself. It's not a separate machine, actually. And cron. A lot of people love cron, but cron is not really well supported with Docker. And to talk about who is using Docker, well, a lot of people. So here you see Heroku, a lot of names that you know, Baidu, Amazon, of course, because a lot of the Amazon stuff is running on Docker, MySQL, MongoDB. So there's a lot of big players in the industry that's using Docker and leveraging the power of Docker. And so today, what I'm going to talk about is let's use that. And use Docker on DigitalOcean. Yeah, DigitalOcean. So why we use it? It's zero setup. So DigitalOcean have the app droplets that you can start up. So basically a setup Docker for you. So it's just one click and running the droplet, and you have Docker environment already configured, and you can just go in, pull down your images, and start running. And its image is easy to manage and monitor, and of course it's very cheap and great for beginners to want to get into the deployment. So my background is front-end developing, and getting into the cloud is very difficult because a lot of the big players like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google is doing that. But I found DigitalOcean very easy to use for my background, and because it's easy set up, and also you don't have to have too much knowledge about the networking stuff required. So you can just have it running in a couple minutes. So, and things you need to get started with a Docker. So you need a deployable application, and later I will show you how I convert a React app into a Docker container, how I Dockerize it, and how it can be run, how you can send it and push to other repositories, and a Docker file that can be built into runnable Docker images. So I will talk about that later, and the host to run the Docker image. So you need a host to run it, and there are some useful Docker commands, which is later I will probably use them. Docker ps, build, pull, rm, and push. So these are the 5 commands that everybody needs to remember. Docker ps lists all the running and stopped containers, not stopped, running containers on the host. Docker build an image using the local Docker file. Docker pull is pulling a Docker image from a repository. It can be public or it can be your private repository. Docker rm, remove containers. And Docker push is pushing your image to a repository. So let's get started. Running Docker on DigitalOcean. So I have here my personal DigitalOcean account. You can see, okay, great. So right now I have really nothing in here. So let's get started. We will just create a droplet. Okay, it's going to take some time. Increase the font. All right. I'm not very good with hotkeys, so I'm gonna just use menus. Okay, so in here you have DigitalOcean provides this one-click apps that you can use. So there are so many that you can choose from. I realized that recently they added machine learning. So here you see Docker, and there are two different versions here. I'm going to use 17.3 for this demo. And because I'm not doing much, I'm going to choose the cheapest one. And of course, Toronto. And the SSH key, I think this is my machine. Okay. If it doesn't work, let's recreate. So that's it. So after you click create, it's going to take like a minute or even less to run this droplet. And I have here a repository which my friend Rock has built. This really simple React app, and it's built with Create React App. It's not Next.js. I haven't heard about that until today. So, this is a really simple application. If you want to see it, it's basically if I run npm start, it's gonna. Okay. Yay! Welcome to Hack Up Meetup, August. Okay, so well, the second line is a lie, so this one is not hosting Docker just yet. But you see, this is how you normally start React application, and you can also do npm run build to build a static site and have it on S3 or serve on some servers. But today we're going to use Docker. So go back to DigitalOcean. I think it's finished. Yay! So you got an ID. Let's copy this ID. There's a new, so small. And then let's SSH into this root. Yes. I hope I chose my key, SSH key correctly. Otherwise, it won't let me in. Yay! Okay, so right now we are inside the droplet. And as you can see, we have Docker. So DigitalOcean already took care of that. So we have Docker installed on this machine. And then you could take a look what I have inside this project. I hope it's not too small. Can you guys see in the back? Probably not. Okay, I'm going to increase it a little bit. Okay, so you got your normal bunch of dependencies. You have a public folder, and then your app.js, which is a very simple one. And then, what is this thing? So to build a Docker image, you first need a Docker file, and this one is the one that I created for this application. So in this file, the first line you see is from node and colon latest. What does this mean is it's basing this. So when Docker builds the image, it's actually building by layers. But the base is going to be Node.js is going to be the latest one. And then the next one, I have a maintainer, which is me, but it's also my email. So if you want to put your information there so people could contact you if your application stopped working, yeah, you could do that. And then the next two lines is copy over the source file. So you could treat this file as some just a bunch of commands that Docker runs when it's built into the container. And each time it runs a command, it creates an intermediate container. And after it finishes, it destroys the last one and then build all the new changes on top of that. So if you're using layers. And then you have copy source, so it copies everything from the source file and then set source as a root directory and then run npm install. You install all the dependencies and then install the serve file, which is one for serving the application, and also it runs npm build to prepare a production build. So in your application, it might be different because it could be anything. If you're not running a Node application, if you have Python or Ruby, you just put whatever. You usually will have a deployment script in here, so it will basically set up the containers for you and then copy over all the files for you. And then you have this expose 5,000. So what this part does is, because Docker is running containers, and then on your local machine, even if you open a port inside the container, it does not mean that you have access on your local. So you have to expose it so that people access, when you're accessing it, you can actually, when you're accessing the port, you are going inside the container itself. And then the last one is the command that is run. So almost every Docker container and Docker file have a command at the last to run a single process. And this one is serve. So what I'm doing is I'm running the serve command, which I installed earlier, to serve whatever in the build folder, which does not exist right now because we haven't run anything yet. So you might think, okay, so why do I need to have this npm install where I already have this? So I can just copy over my local npm modules to the Docker container and everything works, right? First is, it might not work because some npm module might have natives. So if they does, then it might not work in the container. And the second thing is, it takes a long time. It takes a long time to copy over everything inside the container. So, but how would it ignore it? So I have another file called docker ignore that will ignore the two folders, which is build and node modules. So when Docker runs copy, it does not copy these two folders. So I have a project that I can run, and I also have a Docker file. So how do I do it? So let's try it on the local machine first. So this is the folder. You see the Docker file there. So I only need to run Docker build and dot. It's going to take a while. It's going to pull down this first layer, which is Node, which surprisingly I don't have it in my machine. I should have, but maybe probably because I recently reinstalled my operating system, so everything is gone. So it's going to run each command. So right now it's at here from node latest. So after Docker pulls down this image, the next time we run it, we will just recognize it already exists on your host, so it doesn't go through the download process again. So it's going to take a while to download the file. And after that, it's just really fast. Okay, so while we're waiting for npm install, which might take a while, let's go to Docker Hub. So for people that have experience with Docker, you definitely have heard of this Docker Hub. It's a place where you can find a lot of useful images. It's too small. Okay. And then today, what I'm going to show you is to have this application hosted on this Docker Hub. So I already have a bunch. Yeah, I have a React boilerplate project. So here you can see all your images if you go to your account, and you can also create a repository. So what this does is it creates a repository for you to push your images to. So right now I'm just going to name it Meetup React example. So I'm going to have it public, and I click create. Okay. So now this last push is never, so I have never pushed there. So if you try to Docker pull, nothing's going to happen. The image is not there. And let's go check our node. Okay. So now we get a really lovely message at the bottom. It says successfully built at this thing. So after Docker has built this image, it uses it gives the image a name, which in this case is this. You can also tag your images. So if you don't want to have this kind of gibberish, you could tag your images to a different name, and then you could just use that. So let's try to see if we can run this. So all you need to do is docker run. No, I cannot type right now. Docker run, and then the image name. So you see that I didn't put any other parameters here. You can also supply different parameters. You can give it environmental variables. You can give it options so that you could also have it mount a local folder inside a container. There's so many you can do, but for this meetup, I'm just going to run it like this. So okay, so now the process is running. So it's a serve says running on port 5000. So if I go back and then refresh this, oh, we refused to connect for some reason. Maybe I did not expose it correctly. Trust me, it was working before. Okay. That's embarrassing. Yay. Now we have it. So right now, this second line is truth. So this React app is running inside Docker. So you could have all kinds of different apps running. You could have your backend server. You have APIs running on Docker. And then you could link them. You could have MongoDB and all sorts of things. For me, I use Docker to even run my Minecraft server. So yeah. So you might wonder what happened before, why I wasn't able to get access to this 5000, why it's refusing to connect. It's because I forgot one thing. I forgot to pass a command to expose the 5000 port in the container outside my local machine. So if I don't give this -p argument, Docker will not know what port to expose. So it will not able to you will not able to get access to the container. Question?
So I mean, you only exposed to Docker, but not localhost.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have killed the process, and then let's see if we could push this to the repository that we have just started, and then see if we can run it on DigitalOcean. So I have this Docker tag, and I'm gonna have this name. It's a tag. So if you go to Docker tag, it will give you a help says source image and then target image. So create a tag. It will create a tag for the target image that refers to the source image. So this we do is this image. So now I have tagged the image, and then if I go to the lovely command that I have before, Docker push. Oh, the reason it's denied is I forgot to log in. Did I have a typo? Oh, yeah. Thank you. Okay, login succeeded. Now I can push. So while we are waiting, is there any questions?
Is that Docker Hub free? Docker Hub, is it free?
It is free. It is free if you have public repositories, means that everybody around the world can access it. And you also get one free private repository, means only you can access it. So,
So similar to GitHub, right?
Yeah, kind of to GitHub, but right now this one does not have. I think it doesn't have student accounts yet, so it's not like GitHub. GitHub you get like 7 repositories for free for everyone. This one you only get 1. So if you go to Explore, you can see there are so many Docker images that on the Docker Hub that you use. You have Nginx, Redis, Ubuntu, registry, all sorts of images that you can use. You could run it by itself. For example, for Mongo and Postgres, you could just run it by itself. But for something like Node, you could build it in your own image, just like I did before for this React.
If console at the bottom there, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
What console?
It's the last item in the list.
The last one?
It's a Docker image.
I'm sorry, which
CONSUL, Docker image.
Not here on that web page.
It's the last one on the list.
Oh, this one. No. Let's open it up.
So yeah,
Data center runtime.
it's a configuration server. You can instead
Oh.
of having environment variables, you can have the configuration on that system.
Oh, I did not know that. For me, I mainly use Node and to build my Node application, and also for work. So yeah, there's all sorts of applications you can use. Logstash as well. You can have your entire ELK on Docker if you want. Yeah. See if Docker has finished. Okay, so yeah, while we're waiting, browsing through the Docker Hub, it has finished pushing the image. And now, if you go here, you can Docker pull. So you see this line using default tag latest. So what this means is every time I push something to Docker repository, it attach a default tag latest. So if we go back to our lovely repository, you see that last push is 2 minutes ago, and then tags is the default one, latest. So in Docker, you can actually push multiple versions of your application. You can have your own custom tag like version 1, version 2. And then when you run your application, you could specify which tag it will run. So you can have a really specific version of your application when running it. But if I don't give it anything, it will just default to latest. So yeah, it's slow here. And there are any more questions?
Can you use yarn instead of npm?
Yes, I can. But I'm an npm person. I trust Yarn and I use Yarn at work. It just I need to make sure that everything works, which clearly it did not. Okay. But yeah, you could use anything you want. So if you want to use Yarn, you would do in your Docker file. Here you have npm before this. Instead of having this, you have npm install -yarn-g, and then you could just have yarn. And then you could also change this command to use yarn add global. Yeah, right. So you can pretty much run anything using Docker, and it's really a fast way to have a kind of production-ready environment on your local machine, and also it's really lightweight, so you don't have to worry about running stuff. And so for my use cases, a lot of time when I'm doing development, I usually don't go into the cloud in the first minute because it costs money to having like a EC2 instance, and then having the Docker the DigitalOcean droplet, right? It costs money. So I have everything on my local machine tested, linked, and then you produce a Docker compose file, which maybe next meetup or something I could talk about. And then when you deploy it, you can just run that Docker compose file, and you will be sure that everything will work exactly like on your local machine. So we really take out the doubt out of it. So let's see. It's still good thing.
I have one question.
Yeah.
So you said Docker was for especially for single process, like one Docker doing one thing. But
Yeah.
I saw some on Docker Hub, there's some images that you run through images and they're the whole system. Right? right?
Yeah.
So basically they can run anything, or you can run any
Yeah.
other more software to install. So does it defeat the purpose of Docker, or?
Well, I mean, Docker does not prevent you from doing that. For example, when I first got introduced into Docker, I took some bad advice from people. I was using supervisor to run a lot of different processes. But then I realized I could have one running and have it linked together. So for example, you have an application behind Nginx, and then you want to use that as your load balancer. So you can have multiple containers having your application served, and you don't expose them. So you don't expose the port to anywhere, but you link them with Nginx. And in Nginx, when you link them, Docker will create a network that will allow access from Nginx to all your containers. And in there, you can configure how you load balance it and how you whatever you want to do. And then, so that's how you should run a multiple process in a Docker environment. Instead of running everything in one container, have it multiple, and then just have them linked together. So that I think it's because I'm using a really cheap droplet, $5. Yeah. But yeah, it's fast enough for this demo. And okay, so now it's done. And then let's see if I can run this. And because I have this image tag, so I do not need to.
480.
Oh yeah, why not?
Why not? Save some time.
And you see that right now I have access to right now it's attached, but you could also give a parameter called -d. It will detach it, so it will just run the container and then it will exit, and then you can log out your SSH sessions. So if you go to this, I hope it will work. If we go to this IP address, now we have an application running, and this is running on Docker. So if I press Control-C, it will exit the application, and then if I refresh, nothing will work. And then one thing you could do, like I mentioned before, you could have -d running in detached mode. Oh, did I? Yeah. So you see now it just runs, give you an ID for the container. You can also name it. So if you don't want to reference your container file like this, you can also give them a name. And then you refresh it and everything works. So yeah. So this is a really brief introduction of Docker. And any more questions? Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Oh.
What's the status for Docker to support Windows? For instance, to talk in a Windows.
Oh, for Windows, I think last time I checked, if you want to run Docker on Windows, it's still using Linux kernel, but I'm not really sure how they're working to support actual Windows kernel. I could look into that, but at this moment, I don't think it's supported. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Okay. You were going to comment, maybe if there's time, on scalability.
Oh, scalability. Sure. So yeah. So with Docker, you could scale the container. So for example, you have a web server, and then that's serving some kind of application. Docker has built-in command. You could scale it, like, for example, 4 containers, and you can have a load balancer running on top of it. Or you could use an orchestration tool. For example, the one I use is called Rancher. It's I use the same thing for my host. So if you Google Rancher, so this is another way you could have production-ready Docker running. So you can have Rancher. It's a complete container management system. So you install a controller on a host, you install a bunch of other hosts, You connect them together, and then you can basically design how the infrastructure will look like, how many containers each application will take, how they will react if one host went down, and how do they react if a container goes bad, and how do they auto scale and stuff like that. You could also use Amazon ECS to do this kind of thing for the scalability. But this is the one I use because you can self-host. Yeah.
And they say Kubernetes there.
Yes. Yes. Recently they added the support for Kubernetes. Yeah. Yeah. Because otherwise they use Docker Swarm for but right now they added Kubernetes to the support. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Mike and Siwon. My name is Rock. I work here at HackHub, and we partner with DigitalOcean, who hosts the meetups. So same thing as last time. So last time I was the speaker to talk about SSL, and during the meetup I asked, so what do you guys want to hear about next time? And somebody mentioned React. So we bring the React expert from the field, and there we go. We have the second meetup here, and same question: what kind of topic do you guys want to hear, or do you guys want to learn next time? And we will bring the expert here. Yes.
Yeah, maybe GraphQL.
GraphQL, great choice. So, do you want it to?
We really need to find someone.
Don't worry about that. Do you want it to be more on React or just Python? Because React has some choices, like just go with React, or we have the what's the name for? Don't worry, I will get it. Sorry, I forgot the client name because the GraphQL you have server layer, and then for the client side there's different. By Facebook itself, but it takes a lot. Yeah, I will probably with React, maybe Apollo. Yeah. Cool. GraphQL and anything else? Yes.
How about managing a whole host of servers using Ansible or some sort of
Ansible
configuration management?
Okay, Ansible, great DevOps choice. Okay. All right. Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you, Siwon, and also thank you, Rock. So before I go on to talk about our sponsors for tonight, does anybody have any more questions for Siwon and Mike? Yes? No? Okay. 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 So I'm just going to talk about what's next. So before I talk about the sponsors, our next meetup with HackUp Vancouver meetup is going to be for our pre-hackathon event, and it's going to be next week on Thursday, and it's going to be at the same time, but it's going to be at UBC in the Helio building. And it's going to be about how to do data analysis using PHP, and also we're going to have a web design 101. If anybody is interested in getting to know about design or data analysis, you guys can definitely come to our meetup next time. So if you guys all search up HackUp Vancouver meetup on meetup.com, and we will keep you updated about our next upcoming meetup. Okay. Technical difficulties. Oh.
Whatever.
Never mind. Okay. Okay. All right. So you probably saw something up there. So it's going to be a pre-hackathon workshop. It's going to be intro to data analysis with did I say PHP? With Python and web design 101. Yeah, so and also thank you to our sponsors tonight, DigitalOcean and HackUp, as well as Venture Labs, SAP Venture Labs for sponsoring this lovely venue tonight. And yeah, did I miss anything? No? All right, so thank you everybody for coming, and hope to see you at our next meetup. And we will take your suggestions for our next meetup into consideration, and we will definitely look for more experts to come to our future meetups. So now is social time, or you can, yes.
Just one quick question. I see somebody might be recording here. Is this gonna be available later?
Yeah, we're actually having live streaming on YouTube right now, and you guys can all get access to this video. Yes? Yes, you can all get access to this video afterwards, and we can post, I think we have a link on the Meetup group already, so you can go check it out. And yeah, so now we're all done for tonight, and you guys can social or grab some swag or have a safe drive home. Thank you.